All right, well, good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me all right. If you can't, just shout and I'll try to speak up. For those of you who haven't seen us or met us before, I think we saw you guys just after last Christmas.
It was about this time.
Yeah, about in the new year. But we are Nathan and 𝘾𝙀🕬 Duhe, and we have 3 small boys that are occupied in the other room for now, and we'll see how long that lasts. And we work for Wycliffe Bible Translators, and we're doing work in Papua New Guinea with a small language group of about 6,000 people. Our work is to translate the Bible into their language so that they have their own access to learning and reading and discovering God. And we think that's a pretty important work, and we're glad that you guys are interested in hearing about that. So, yeah, I mean, just a little bit more about our people group. It's a kind of pretty remote out in the jungles of Papua New Guinea. There's about 25 villages that we have to hike to just to keep everybody included. The culture kind of demands that everyone is a participant in every project that goes on. And it covers about 50 square miles of jungle, which is enough work to get around. At least for me. We haven't tried it with the family yet, but we'll see how that goes. And we've been back here since May of 2019. I finished my master's degree and got a little bit more training since we got stuck here with COVID, and we've been eagerly awaiting the moment we get to go back, and that's coming soon in the next 2 weeks. So as long as everything goes to plan and we don't get sick and nothing else happens, we are heading back to Papua New Guinea to continue the work of Bible translation.
Just to kind of interrupt for a moment, they came before COVID last year, and the allocations team actually decided to sponsor their visas. So Central is already kind of a partner of the Duhes and their missionary work, and so we're hopeful that's a relationship that'll continue. They're a wonderful family that I know 𝘾𝙀🕬 from high school, actually, and she reached out and said, I am going to be a missionary, and that's how we connected. And I have brought them to every church that I have served since, because it's just an amazing story of call and of journey. This month we are talking about journeys in the vein of the Magi and thinking about how journeys have transformed us. And so I invited 𝘾𝙀🕬 and Nathan to come and talk about not only their journeys before they came home, their first journeys in Papua New Guinea, but then what happens to missionaries when you are in furlough or you are stuck in the United States in the midst of a pandemic? Like, what does the journey between the journeys look like? And so I wanted them to talk a little bit about that and wanted to give you all just a little bit of background as we start.
Yeah, and let me tell you, I took a furlough class in PNG with some other missionaries who've done lots of furloughs and were trying to help us prepare for everything. And I was like, Pam, you did not prepare us for a global epidemic. And she's like, how could I know? I was like, I'm just saying, I'm putting it in the class review. But yeah, it has been a crazy time. So when we saw you guys a year ago, hello. When we were back here a year ago, we were actually like 4 months from heading back to Papua New Guinea. We were scheduled to return at the end of May 2020, and we were super excited. So we were just a couple, like $100 in monthly partnership away from leaving. And we were just like everybody else, I think, completely oblivious to how, like, literally the whole world was about to change. Not just our lives, like the whole world. None of us really had a clue. I think, like, we maybe had heard of COVID on the news a tiny bit, right? Because we had kind of heard that there was like this virus in China, but we were like, we're fine, we're not in China. So yeah, so in the months that followed, like, we continued to travel. Like, we visited you guys in New York, we went to Louisiana, we packed and sent some of our stuff to Papua New Guinea. We were like, all right, let's get ready. We're going in May. This will get here a little bit after us. Let's get some stuff shipped. I vaguely, as I said, remember hearing something about a coronavirus in China on the news. But we were like, whatever, and we bought tickets to return to PNG. So at the beginning of March, we had our tickets in hand, or, you know, on our phones. They were electronic. And we were like, we're going home. We were so excited. It was amazing. And then literally the next week, we just sat with everyone else in the world and watched in horror as the entire world shut down. And we're like, what is going on? And it was just crazy because like almost within a week of buying our tickets were canceled and they could not guarantee us any travel in the future. Like they just handed us our money back. And normally they're like, we're going to hold on to your money and you can fly later. But they were just like, nope, we have no idea what's going to happen. Here's your money. And we saw like an immediate drop to our support. A lot of our friends lost jobs almost right off the bat or were furloughed. And we're like, listen, we don't know what's going to happen financially. We want to support your ministry. We will as soon as we know what's going to happen financially, but we're scared. And everybody was scared, right? And it was kind of normal. But in that, like Nathan still had to finish school. He had to do it from home though. And we were in this tiny bitty 2-bedroom apartment with no outside space to play with 3 small children. And our lease was about to be up. Like, we're like, awesome. So Nathan needs to finish class. We're trapped in a box together. And we are about to be homeless. This is great. So actually, we ended up being really blessed. We have friends of ours that had a house in a different part of California, not that far from us, and they opened it up to us for a little while. They're like, you know, it's not a permanent thing, but it'll give you a little bit of breathing room. It's got enough space that Nathan can do his classes, and you can have the boys in a different part of the house so they're not screaming and interrupting his class. And it did. It gave us like space and time to breathe and try to kind of wrap our heads around what was going on and what we had to do next. And so like Nathan was able to finish his classes and we were just like, it's okay. It's okay. Like any minute now, this shutdown's going to end. We were all very naive back then. We were like, any minute now, this shutdown's going to end and we're going to be able to go back to PNG as planned. It's going to be fine. Like pretty sure like we'll stay at this house and then they're going to be like, all right, go. And we'll be like, cool. We're ready to go. We're packed. Everything's packed. We're living out of suitcases. We're good at this. We're going to go. But the world was shutting down more, not less. And we needed somewhere to go long-term at this point because now we had our supervisor who originally was like, it's fine, you're going to be fine, just stay packed, be ready to go. And now he was like, so, yeah, about that. Maybe later this year. And we're like, awesome, we don't have a place to live for that long. So we put out a call for help on our newsletter. If you get our newsletter, you might have remembered seeing that. And almost right away, we had an offer for a place to stay in Oklahoma. Good friends of ours who we knew from California who invited us to stay. We'd stayed with them before, like short term, just to visit. And so we were pretty excited. We packed everything back up that we had unpacked for a little while. And we were just like, still like, all right, cool. We'll just be there as long as it takes for things to open up and to get back to PNG as soon as a path opens up for us to do so. So we're like, it won't be that long. It won't be that long. And then a week before we were scheduled to move to Oklahoma, that all fell through. And we were like, okay, so we still need to move. We're still kind of in between and homeless and all these things. And so we called the Wycliffe Center here in Dallas after being told that a lot of Wycliffe housing is full because so many people had already been sent back from the countries they were serving in. So all of a sudden, all these people around the world were finding themselves kicked out of the countries they serve in because of COVID, needing a place to live. Like it was crazy. And so they're like, it might be full, but it's worth a shot. And we called and they had a place and we're like, awesome, we'll take it. And thankfully, yeah. And thankfully, yeah, we were like, so we'll be next week. Dallas is not that far from Oklahoma. So it was just a slight recalculation, a little bit south. And we were able to drive to Dallas instead. And we were just thankful that that was provided. Like it felt like a miracle because we were expecting to be told like, you don't have a place to live. And we were going to have to start calling friends and just be like, can anybody help? But at that point, like we were told, hey, don't plan to be back in Papua New Guinea until the new year. And even then it was like a very tentative, like it could be longer. And so we found ourselves as like missionaries without a mission field. Like we were called, but without a way to fulfill our calling. Like we couldn't go do the work that we had prepared all this time to be doing. And we told people, like, we are COVID stranded. And I'm not gonna lie, okay, mostly me, I was mad. I was very mad. Like Nathan was handling it. He's a lot more flexible than I am, but I was mad because like we didn't get to spend our last months in America soaking up time with our best friends and family. Like we literally had to leave California without seeing people and hugging people goodbye. Like, and I was in tears. Like I had to walk away from my best friend without getting to hug her for one more time. And I didn't get more time with her and all these things. Like you go on a furlough and you're like, awesome, we're going to be in America and we're going to be able to go out and do things and see people. And there's really nice toilet paper. And then COVID, and it's like, well, this now feels like we're back on the mission field. This is not a break. What is this? And so I like, man, it was mentally really rough. Like we're starting to a little bit like God's plan and intent for us. Like, okay, like, are you sending us back to PNG or are you using this to ground us here? And honestly, like the temptation to grab onto something that was right in front of us was really strong. Like we just wanted some security. We wanted a way to feel grounded in this crazy time instead of hanging on to God. And it just like that feeling was overwhelming sometimes. It's like, we know God has called us and all these things, but right now we just want to feel safe, right? Because everything is unstable and everything's a little rocky. And we're really struggling, I guess, with like that idol of security. And so honestly, like reading through the Bible, all these other things, it was like, wow, we have never related, like as a large group of people, to the Israelites in the desert so well, right? Like wandering and feeling like we had no place to go, even if it's just wandering from room to room in your house. Right? You're like, oh, the living room again. I saw this a couple minutes ago. Feeling as though maybe God had abandoned us at times, right? Because it's just like, God, where are you in all this? What are you doing? Why is this happening? Why are our friends getting sick? Why are family getting sick? What is going on? And questioning his timing. Like, why would you allow this to happen? Couldn't you have waited until we left? Like, really, come on, you know, and God's purpose for us and his love for us as we see people who love him getting sick and dying. And it's just like, what, God, what are you doing? Because we know this couldn't have been a surprise to him. And that's kind of like when, like reading through God's word, but also my husband kind of reminded me, like, there are two ways to look at the time that Israel spent in the desert. And you can look at it as like, oh, wow, that was so hard. Why would God do that to them? And not like, why, God, why would you do that? Like, what did they do to deserve that? Or you can look at it and just be like, wow, that was so necessary. Look what God did with that time with them. You know, and so like, yes, like we grumbled and we complained and we demanded why, because we're human and it's been hard and God gets that. You know, it's like people have died, businesses have collapsed, mental health issues have been escalating. Like these have been some real big problems and concerns, and not just like at a distance, you know, it's easier to kind of ignore things when it's at a distance, but when it's people you know that are suffering and struggling, like this becomes really hard. But then we remembered that God's timing is always so much better than our timing. And we have a lot of really good reminders in our stories in PNG about that, of like me nearly dying and the way that God came through for us. And just having to remember that God's ways are always better than our ways, even when we're not sure about it, you know, because he sees so much more than we do. So instead of demanding why, like we started to ask him what instead, you know. What did he have for us? What did we need to learn about ourselves and about him during this time? What could we see going on around us? Where was God at work in this? You know, and it's like waiting is hard. And I don't know about the rest of you. I have no patience. I thought I was a patient person. And then I got married and had kids. And I've discovered I have no patience. And I own up to it right away. I am not a patient person. You know, and so for me, especially being a planner who has a plan and I like to stick to it, like waiting feels like such a waste of time. And it's like, but there are next steps and I want to get to them. But more and more, like, I'm just really coming to think that some of God's like greatest works, his greatest acts are done in the waiting, are done in the desert. you know, and we've been reminded by so many things this last year that you need to start being faithful with the small things, the things that are right in front of you, the littlest things, even if it's just like getting out of bed in the morning. You know, like, all right, God, you allowed me to wake up this morning. I am going to honor that by waking up, thanking you, and actually getting out of bed. I might even make some breakfast, you know, and it's like just being faithful with the small things. And so like, we've just really learned that when we look back on 2020, we have two ways to see it. We can see it as the time when things were stolen from us, when we lost time with our closest friends, and when we were kept from doing the work God has in store for us. Or we can see it as a time of further preparation, when God used what was intended for evil to prepare us even more for the work and challenges ahead of us. And so in 2020, like, we just want to share some of the victories we saw. You know, we saw our oldest two boys, Mike and Isaac, become best friends. That doesn't mean they don't want to kill each other still sometimes, but oh my goodness, the way they play together and the way they stand up for each other has just been magical. And we've seen them both accept Jesus, which I didn't even really know that a 5 and a 4-year-old could do. But their like understanding of theology could give a seminary teacher a run for their money, because it gives me a run for my money on a daily basis. Like, their questions about God and their excitement about all that he's done is infectious. Like, they have tried to evangelize half of our neighborhood, which is like 90% Christian. And it is hysterical, and it's beautiful, you know? It's like, this is the Holy Spirit at work. This is God at work in our kids. And we saw like our youngest son, who was born at the beginning of our furlough, our little baby, is now like a little boy, you know? He's talking, he's walking, he's screaming in the other room. And he's like ready to take on the world, and he adores his big brothers. And I cannot wait to get him back to Papua New Guinea, because that kid is gonna love being in the jungle, you know, and just the excitement that comes from seeing like, oh my gosh, he is gonna thrive there. Because we got moved around and delayed, we actually got to see friends here in Dallas from a couple years ago that we didn't think we were gonna get to see for Pop. Running out of time on our furlough, we didn't need to travel, so we were expecting, oh, okay, I'm sorry, like, we're not going to get to see you this time. And instead it's like, hey, so we have to move there. I hope we can see each other, even if it's at a distance with masks on, you know? And so we got to see these people we loved that we weren't going to get to see. And on top of that, we made some new friends here, which, let me tell you, is really hard to do sometimes when you're a missionary, because every new friend means someone you have to say goodbye to, because you're always in transition. So sometimes it's hard to put yourself out there to make new friends, because you're like, you're another goodbye I have to say. That's another like blow to my heart when we move again or transition again. But the friendship has been such a gift, and now it's like hard to imagine our lives without them in it. And so it's like, okay, God, like you even put our hearts at risk again, putting us out there to have more people to say goodbye to, but more people to love. Like Nathan told you, like, he took some additional classes beyond his master's degree. Never just say that it's just semantics, because semantics is hard. Like, he took a class on semantics and things like that, and discourse analysis, right? So like the way that people say things and the importance of that. And oh my God, it's hard. Like, he would try to explain things to me and it sounds Greek, but it's not Greek, because he speaks Greek and I kind of know what that sounds like. But it's going to be so helpful for translation. And so it was like, wow, like this additional bit of training is really going to make a difference as we start really kicking off our translation project. And then I ended up teaching, like, as an assistant professor. I was not the class head, but I ended up getting to teach a class designed to prepare other missionaries for the mission field, and like preparing them for culture shock and things that'll happen when they move overseas. And it was something like I've always dreamed kind of being a teacher, but never thought I would do it. And I actually got to like step into that role and share a lot of our experiences and the crazy, silly things that happened. And truly, I think, share a message of like giving yourself grace, because living overseas is hard and living in another culture is hard. And got to like share our heart. And it was this huge gift, because like I knew before that I missed Papua New Guinea. But sharing our stories and our heart for the country we've been serving in, I was like, all right, we need to go home. Like, I miss our adopted home. I want to go back to Papua New Guinea. And so it was this huge gift for me, even being able to share all that, because it just really solidified in my heart that that is where we are called. And so, okay, what do we have to do to go home? And it was awesome, because after a while, like really focusing on what was in front of us, what God had for us, the little things right there, we started to worry a lot less about being stuck in America and started being excited about just being faithful with what God had for us right in front of us. So, and despite COVID and all of its many challenges, like our financial partnership rose again and we met our budgeted amount, which was a miracle, because again, friends and family who are still furloughed, still struggling financially, still trying to make things work, and yet people choosing to faithfully give with that. And I think that's just huge, because it is so hard to let go of financial security sometimes, and it's so hard to act with fear when it comes to our money. And we saw people just stepping out and being faithful, and it was incredible and such a gift to us to see that. And then a path opened back up to Papua New Guinea about October for missionaries to return through a United Nations World Foods Program flight that was going monthly. And actually we're about to get on the very last flight in January. And so like a path opened back up, and it's literally up until this last week where I think 2 commercial flights got through and 2 missionary families returned. It has been the only way any of our missionaries got back to Papua New Guinea, which has been so hard on our friends that have been serving in Papua New Guinea, because they've had so little support. And so all these people returning have been like this huge sign of hope to them that, okay, like people are coming back, we're gonna get some rest because we've been holding down the fort while you've all been gone. So that's just been huge. And we are actually literally scheduled to return in 2 weeks. In 2 more Sundays, we will be, Lord willing, on a flight back to PNG. And so like there's some transformative journeys like the Magi's and all these things that happen like when you're moving and when you're crossing great distances and doing all these things. And we've done that over and over again. We've done that. But there are sometimes transformative journeys that only happen when you are waiting, when you are faithful with the small things placed before you, again, even if it's just getting out of bed that morning. So we wouldn't have chosen to spend the last year the way we did, but we understand that maybe we needed it this way. We can say with a lot of certainty that we feel more prepared than ever to return and serve in Papua New Guinea. And so we're kind of hoping that the next time that we get to see you, 3 or 4 years from now, unless we set up a link over Zoom, because we can all do that now while we're in PNG. I can't promise good internet though. But we're kind of hoping the next time we get to see all you, we'll be sharing about the progress of the 𝘈𝙀 New Testament with our people group, you know, and that in alone is exciting, that like, look, the next time we see you, we should be like 3 or 4 years into a translation project and have some real progress to share with you about what God has been doing with the 𝘈𝙀 people and how their translation work is going and what that looks like. And that's exciting to think and dream about, of just like, we're almost back. And God has been faithful while we've been here. He has provided for us. He has taken care of us and our family. And we are finally seeing the doors open for us to go back to our adopted home.
Thank you so much for sharing your story and your journeys with us. I'm going to open it up. I know a lot of people have been on mute. Thank you for that. It makes it a little easier just in case there's any feedback. But if you have any questions about missionary life in general, I know she said that the toilet paper is better here. And then I know that the spiders are really big in Papua New Guinea. But also anything about missionary life, anything about the journey that she talked about during the furlough, anything about the work that they're going to be doing in Papua New Guinea. I'm going to open the floor if any of you have any questions. We've got some time for you to kind of engage with 𝘾𝙀🆺 in some dialogue about what they do.
𝘾𝙀🆺, you mentioned that there are, hi, it is great to see you. And I hope that sometime soon, when you're back in Papua New Guinea, we can get an internet connection that's stable enough to do this again.
Love that.
That's a big challenge. But you had mentioned that when you got back to Dallas, that the housing was full. How many different missionaries does Wycliffe have that had to come back? You know, I know you.
Yeah, we know, like, I want to say, I mean, gosh, so pretty much anyone over the age of 50 was asked to return to their home country. And there's a surprising amount, maybe to some people, a surprising amount of missionaries still in their like late 50s, 60s, finishing up translation projects that were overseas. We actually know a number of people who have been told, like, you need to retire. So they actually have record numbers of people retiring now because, like, with health issues, with their age and the concerns with COVID, like, they're like, it's just, we can't take accountability for you being overseas and the possibility of you dying there because you get sick and we can't get you the medical attention you need. So we actually know even a number of folks we served with in PNG who were pulled back to this area because of age and health concerns. And some of them are trying to find a way to get back, even just to finish little things, but a lot of them are finding unique ways to finish translation here and preparing to retire. So I can't give you an exact number, but it feels like a lot. Like Nathan's parents have just officially been like, we're done, we're retiring. Thankfully, their translation project in the Philippines is done. We know at least 3 older couples here, but we also know like a lot of younger people were just sent back, and some of it was health concerns, some of it was family concerns, some of it was like your furlough's already coming up and this is going to delay you leaving. This is the last flight going out for a while. And so it was interesting to come back to Dallas and talk with people, and they're like, yeah, COVID forced us to leave. And some of them are never going back, even the younger couples, because they're like, now we're having trouble getting visas. Like, they're just not open to us coming back. We're like, we understand how blessed we are because PNG is very much like, we want to find a way to make this work, you know, and that right now looks like us not only like flying with all the headgear and protective masks and everything like that, but having to quarantine for 2 weeks in our house when we get there. So it's like, we've got 2 countdowns going. We've got the countdown to when like we leave, and then we have the countdown to when we get to get out of quarantine and hug everyone when we get there.
That was my other question, is traveling with your little ones has to be such a challenge.
Yeah, and it's one of our big prayer requests. Micah and Isaac are older and they do really well. Timmy is our challenge. He is adorable. And it's a really good thing he's adorable because he is also very opinionated, and he's 18 months old and knows everything clearly. And we're just not sure how he's going to do. And normally our flight to PNG would be like a 14-hour flight to Brisbane, and then a 2-hour flight into Port Moresby, and then an 1.5-hour flight on a little 10-seater Kodiak airplane into the highlands of Papua New Guinea. But because of all this COVID craziness, we have to go a different route. We're actually going east instead of west, and we will fly from Dallas, Texas to 𝘾𝙀𝙉𝙏𝙀𝙿. So it's weird. Like, we've got a 14-hour flight to Turkey, I think. I'm terrible at geography. This is my husband.
And you got it right.
Yeah. And then we've got another 7-hour flight to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. I looked it up. Kuala Lumpur. And then another 7-hour flight to Port Moresby in Papua New Guinea. And then that lovely little 2-hour flight on the 10-seater Kodiak airplane, which I can tell you I hate flying in small planes. Like, God is good to me because I'm like, I hate these planes. My kids love them, my husband loves them, and I'm like, it's a tin box that's gonna fall out of the sky, it's great. But I also know, like, this is just what we have to do to get around, and I will most likely survive and it'll be okay. But my husband laughs at me because I'm like, I hate these planes. And my kids think it's great because they can see the pilots and all the knobs, and they're like, look, they're flying the plane. So yeah, so we have about 30+ hours of flight time this time around. And the one great news is once we get to Kuala Lumpur, barring no like changes to the flight schedule, we have a 16-hour layover. And so we are getting a airport hotel room, and we're just gonna sleep. Like, we're just gonna crash. That's the plan. Hopefully the kids cooperate. We're just gonna sleep and rest and let the kids go a little crazy, jumping on the bed probably. But just get some wiggles out so that we can make it those last, because then it'll just be 9 hours left of flying, you know? And so, but But yeah, so it's a challenge, and we're just like, at this point, we're like, I don't care. Whatever we have to do to get back, we have 2 weeks of quarantine to get over it when we get there. But yeah, like literally once we land in like at 𝘾𝙀𝙉𝙏𝙍 in the highlands of Papua New Guinea, like we can't touch or hug the pilot, which is really hard because we know a lot of the pilots and they're friends of ours. They can't touch our stuff. We have to move all of our baggage ourselves. And once we get there, like we will be dropped off at our house. Our house is caution taped off. The only people allowed through are like the delivery servicemen who have a protocol, and the medical staff in 𝘾𝙀𝙉𝙏𝙍. They actually have a process that had to be approved by the Papua New Guinean government to allow us to quarantine in our home in the mission center instead of having to quarantine at a government hotel in Port Moresby that would be thousands of dollars more expensive. And really hard with 3 small children.
So it sounds like Papua New Guinea is doing very well with the COVID situation.
They are, in the sense that they have less cases, but there are some challenges too. Like Papua New Guinea does not have the medical infrastructure that a developed country has. And so there are also, we know, like a lot of cases going unreported because people just die in the village and they never get to a hospital. They're trying to handle it as best they could. They are a culture that is not used to personal space. So like social distancing and mask wearing and things like that have been a really big culture shock for them, even more so than America. And even just like the level of hygiene, and the idea of like going to the hospital when you're sick, because a lot of people in the villages think that hospitals are where you go to die. And that's normally because by the time they are sick enough to think that maybe they should go to the hospital, they're already dying. Or the hospitals themselves like just have the challenges of like running out of water, running out of electricity, not being able, like they're just underfunded, understaffed. So there are a lot of challenges. Like they're trying to test. I think the hospitals in Port Moresby probably have been the most efficient at testing, but again, you're facing like cultural challenges and cultural differences. But this has also been a really unique way that like Wycliffe and its associated organizations in the countries they serve in have been like a really neat tool to serve these governments during COVID. Because of the translation work they do, they were able to, you know, put all of these different national translators and expat translators together to translate information on like how to wash your hands, what it means to social distance, wearing your mask, like putting together medical documents and things like this very quickly. And so for me, like, I'm really proud of my organization for being a part of that and like helping and serving all of the countries they serve in by doing these documents, helping with the translation work of getting all this information out there as quickly as possible.
Can you describe the translation process? Do these people you work with read so you can print, or is it all word of mouth?
Some of them do. There are school teachers in the villages, but their language, 𝘾𝙀𝙁, is actually not a written language. It is oral only. We have there was a little bit of work done back in the 1990s, and so there's like a rough orthography, the written language. And my husband has taken that with him on journeys into visit with them, but some of the teachers have been like, that's not right, that's not right. So we actually have to, one of our first steps is going to be getting the orthography approved once we know enough of the language to really work out the alphabet and things. And so part of that is like forming a committee within the people group, having them appoint people they want working as translators. We ourselves have to start getting to know the language. We need to start learning it. We need someone dedicated to teaching us the language, because even though like ideally it's the people group themselves doing about 90% of the translation, we need to know the language so that we can truly consult in a good and like helpful fashion, because we can't correct them if we don't understand what we're reading. At least we can't work with them well if we don't understand the language and its nuance. And so a lot of our yeah.
You've been there before, so do you know much 𝘾𝙀𝙁 now, or?
I don't. Nathan has, he has a word list. He's been in there twice. I was not able to go with him when he went in because the first time I was really sick, I had just gotten over the whole nearly dying thing that happened our first term. And then the second time turned out I was actually pregnant. And I couldn't stand smells at all. And so I didn't want to go into the people group and be puking every time that they tried to talk to me. I just didn't think that would be a great way to greet them. So my husband went, and he has been learning some of the vocabulary, even on furlough. He's got his word list. He's been plugging it into some of the software that he has to help with this. We had a little bit of work, again, done in the 1990s that we have access to, so we're able to look at it. But truly, like, I think I know one word. I can say water in 𝐼𝙀𝙏𝙍𝘼𝙇, which is iki. My husband can tell me a lot more, and he tells me all the time there are going to be some words that I'm going to have a lot of trouble saying. So I'm like, thanks, Ben.
Basically, you have to work with the people group to create the written language before you even start translation work.
Yes, because we have to have an approved orthography. And part of our contract with the PNG government is, like, we go through very official steps where Nathan has to, like, get an approved orthography. He has to write a grammar paper. Like, this has to be done very academically. So even beyond just the immediate translation work, like, they have language documentation and other things that really make it official. Like, this language has an official orthography and approved grammar, and all of, like, the intricacies of linguistics work that I frankly really don't understand the way that my husband does. So it's really good that that's his job. But yeah, like, so we start with the orthography, we start learning the language, the translation process starts. We're probably going to start in the book of Luke, because it tends to be kind of the most to the point. And the idea would be to eventually translate the entire New Testament, and then, like, earlier from the Old Testament, probably the covenant. So we'd have, like, Genesis and some of the, you know, the Abrahamic covenant, the Davidic covenant, and things like that, just to set the stage for the New Testament, so they have some of the background information. If and when we get to the Old Testament, it will be driven by the people group themselves. Like, at that point, it's like we will give you consultants, we will give you the, like, outside tools that you need, but the like, once a people group gets to the Old Testament, the really neat thing is they pretty much take that on themselves. And we want that. Like, we want these projects to be self-sustaining. Like, God forbid we never be able to return to Papua New Guinea for whatever reason. We'd like to think that that work would continue because they want the word of God in their language, and they are determined to see it happen. And Wycliffe will provide as many tools as they can to make sure that they can get that if they truly want it.
Wondering, what do you do about your children when they're there? Do they, like, go to school, or what do they do during the day when you're busy doing these things?
They drive me crazy. No, they love living in Papua New Guinea. They get to be my little wild boys. We homeschool. And that's one other thing COVID has been really great for, because our oldest son is 5, and so he's at about that kindergarten level, and he's been very interested in learning. So we've actually been able to kickstart a lot of our homeschooling this year, not having anything else to do. And so, yeah, so we are prepared to homeschool. We sent over a number of books and curriculum and everything like that. And it's we're actually using Simply Charlotte Mason, which has a strong, like, Bible-based history program. It has all the things for, like, early reading, mathematics, and art, and handicraft type things like that, because I wanted a curriculum that actually had a strong arts emphasis, because a lot of the work I do is with the arts. And so we're actually really excited because, you know, they're boys, they're very energetic. They love being outside, which is one of the reasons they love PNG, is the weather's almost always nice. Even if it's raining, it's warm. And they love to play outside in the rain. So America was kind of shocking to them with its very cold rain. And they love bugs. So it's one of those things, like, if you follow our newsletter, if you follow our Facebook pictures and things like that, you will see lots of bugs and animals. Because they just bring them home all the time, and I don't know how many times I've had to tell them that worms don't come in the house, but the bugs themselves invite themselves in. So I've never cleaned so hard in my life trying to keep bugs out of the house, because they just chase after every bit of food. You know, we'll have probably a dog in the village as well as at the mission center, because they just kind of act as, like, a guard dog and protection, as well as, like, cats, because they eat mice, and the mice are big and eat everything, including your food and your house. But so we honestly just keep them busy a lot of times, letting them be boys. Like we do school in the morning, especially because they're so little. School does not need to be a lot right now. And then we spend a lot of time outside exploring their natural environment. And they love to learn about foraging and things that they can eat in the wild. They love to identify different bugs and plants and animals. And they are starting to learn that some of them are dangerous. So we're getting a bit of understanding of like, you can't just pet everything you come across. But they are smart little boys. And so it's a lot of fun to be outside with them. And especially like, I wish you guys could see Micah outside, because he will just look at you and be like, God created this world and he put bugs in it. And that's really cool. And it's just like, no, it is. That is very cool. He probably knew that little boys would love bugs, you know? And so our kids just honestly think that God put this earth here as like a playground for them. And he's not wrong. And we are very excited to like get back to that and just having them help us with our garden, you know, an itty bitty food garden, but they love it and they think they're helping. They kind of are. But yeah, we keep them busy being outside and playing and learning as they play.
That was a great question.